chair of the legislature is here. A lot of pressure.
We're set to begin.
We're ready? All right. Well, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good to see you all. I like that some people are wearing the appropriate color. We're gonna work on this throughout the year.
I have that color. I didn't have the other color. I'm very happy.
I'll send a reminder next time.
I have one thing. I can wear the same thing every meeting. One thing in that color.
Funny. Okay, so let's see. This is the March 7th Government Operations Committee. And are there any changes to the agenda? I don't think so. Comments from the public? I don't see anybody. Let's do the minutes approval from the February 1st meeting. Rich moves, seconded by Susan. Any questions or comments, changes? All in favor? That's unanimous. Nice to have everybody present so we can just raise our hands. Okay, minutes pass. We are going to go right to the Department of Assessment, and Jay Franklin is here. And I know this is a hot topic right now, but we can't talk about it all morning. So I'm gonna cut you off if it starts going too long, because we do have lots of other things to talk about. But I'm going to turn it over, well, our first is a resolution. Should we do that first? Yep. Okay. Where did it go? Okay, so this is a resolution, appointment to temporary hearing panels, Board of Assessment review. Can I have somebody move that? Rich moves, seconded by Susan. You want to say something about this?
This is something that we do every year. So the state law has us have a full county-wide Board of Assessment review. It's made up of Martha Preston, Mike Cannon, and Edie Spalding. Each year we add 6 temporary hearing panel members, so that Board of Assessment review can then become 3. This allows us to, one, handle more people coming in for grievances at the formal time in May, and it also allows us to have specialized boards as well. So we can have a commercial board, an urban board, and a rural board as well to have those specialties. This year we have 1 new member to be considered, John Baradas. I think it would be great to have an architect, landlord on here just to help with some of the new construction issues that we have and being able to look at those construction documents. So we're glad to have him volunteer.
Great, and all those applications were at the back of your packet, so you could have seen those. Mike.
At our legislature meeting this week, and privilege of the floor, one of these people came in and spoke and made a lot of serious allegations about the assessment department not being capable of doing assessment on an annual basis. I don't know whether you were able to hear those comments or not, Jay, but I'm wondering whether this person being on this group, that person can look at this with an open mind, look at the assessments with an open mind.
I have no question Susan can answer the question that needs to be answered at that grievance time, which is for that one individual property, is that value correct? So could that one assessment, is that property worth what that assessment is as of July 1 of 2023? There's many laws on the books that govern what we do and how we do it, and not Absolutely. A lot of people are really aware of what we're supposed to do, the metrics by which we're graded and reviewed upon. So I have full confidence in my staff being able to do annual reassessments. It would be great to have a little more staff to be able to more adequately serve the public. But based upon what I've seen of our assessment role that we have out there, both in terms of what properties that have sold, properties that are currently listed for sale, our assessments are on the low side still. But it's pretty slow in our office right now. I was going to get into that in my presentation, but we sent out a little over 8,000 change notices so far, 8,012. We have 434 appointments scheduled from those 8,000 change notices.
Well, I got calls from at least the 12.
So, that's 5.4%. I think a lot of people haven't got their change notice yet, so they don't know what that tax impact is going to be. We had to stagger the mailings so that we could handle people coming in and make sure that everybody got their fair share of time in order for us to dedicate to that town. So I think once they see their tax impact.
Yeah, I think you've answered my question, and my question particularly was whether you felt this group was still the right group.
Yep. And, one thing, if you have someone criticizing what you're trying to do, bring them in. They probably have good ideas and try to improve something. If I can't win over who's probably the largest realtor over the last 20 years in Ithaca and have her support our values, then we're doing something wrong in our office.
We'll suggest that maybe you look at the privilege of the floor section of our last meeting, if you haven't done that.
Yeah, my staff has told me all about it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I've got Greg, then Rich.
Jay, I appreciate you making the last comment that you just made about bringing in people. I think we need to be in a spot where we encourage a variety of opinions, and I don't think we should just rubber stamp people that just sort of nod their heads along with whatever we're doing. I don't think that's a good and productive government. So I also question the characterization of some of Susan's comments, because I don't know if it was directly a criticism of the assessment department, but more a criticism of the task in which, the heavy lift that we're asking your department to do on an annual basis, not about the capability, but is really the task and the system something that's just unattainable. So I took it less as a direct critique, because I know she and others think very highly of the department, as they should. But I think if somebody raises a question, I don't know if we really need to be editing the makeup of certain boards with people who may not disagree, or who may agree or disagree or speak out against something.
Okay, thanks. Rich?
Yeah, I have a disclosure. I have retained John Baradas as an architect. I don't believe that disqualifies me from voting, since it's an unpaid position and it's unrelated to any work I'm having him do. But I would just also make the same comment I generally make every year, that I'm always impressed with the quality of the people we have in our community, the expertise that we can bring to bear on these assessment review panels. So I will support the appointments.
Great, thanks, Rich.
I also
Susan?
worked with John when I worked at Cornell. He was an architect on a project I was assigned to. But I don't think it disqualified.
Yeah.
That was years ago.
Okay, let's go ahead and vote on this, and then we can keep talking about more assessments. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. All right, back to you, Jay.
All right, I have a handout in your packet there, so I just wanted to give you some kind of numbers on our annual equity maintenance program, touch on where we're at, and I will comment on some of the difficulties we have, but when the law says you shall, we shall do it. So for this year, we saw our biggest our total assessment increase. We're up 10.57%. We revalued 23,600 parcels. Pretty much all residential parcels were revalued, all apartments, a lot of other classes of commercial properties. Where else? I revalued all of the wholly exempt properties this year. They don't see a taxable value increase, but last year we saw a lot of discussion regarding how exempt the county is, how exempt the city is, so I wanted to make sure that number was somewhat updated. Again, valuing Cornell is always fun. How, what's their high-speed particle accelerator worth? Is there a market? Is it real property or personal property? you know, are you going to build Sage Chapel again? So it's a fun task to do, trying to revalue some of these things, but it is an exercise in futility, but I do like to make sure that when we have numbers on the roll that all of the numbers are correct. Our taxable value increase was 13.9%. Historically, we kind of trudge along at 3.3%, at least back to 2009, so this is a pretty significant year for us. Typically, we send out around 8,900 changes. This year, it's 23,600, the vast majority of those being increases. I put the kind of history of our changes. You can kind of see we're trudging along pretty normally. We hit COVID, everything kind of stopped for that 2021 assessment roll. And then due to increasing interest rates, low supply, high demand, that's just driving up those prices over those last 3 years. The next chart down below, I wanted to show the special franchise, public utility, and ceiling railroad figures. So I don't know if a lot of people realize that all of the poles, wires, cables, and pipelines that are installed by our utilities are actual taxable real property. So the special franchise is all of those poles, wires, cables, pipes that run along the public right-of-way. Those are valued by New York State, and I'm just given a value for those. Those same poles, wires, cables, pipes, when they're on private property, are public utility. And those are ones that I have to value. But I don't have the inventory, I don't have the program, so I have New York State value them. Since they're the same things as special franchise, they might as well value them the same. But we've seen a big increase these last 2 years in those accounts. The Borger Station in Dryden saw a $50.4 million increase last year. By far the biggest increase I've ever put on the assessment roll. And then they had another $7.6 million increase there for that property. They typically lag behind, so I think this was work that was done in 2021 and 2022. Most of the time it's, you know, a 1-year delay on what may get put on, but for these types of properties, it's a 2-year delay.
Could you explain what you were saying, the border what?
Borger, B-O-R-G-E-R.
Oh, Borger, yep, okay,
Sorry.
I'm with you now.
Yep. And then overall, it was about a $20 million increase in the county for EH&E gas. I forget the name of that utility as well, whoever took over for Dominion there. NYSEG, on pretty much on all of their accounts, saw about a $1 to $2 million increase. I haven't received the ceiling railroad figures yet. That's a figure for all of our railroad line from Milliken all the way down out through Danby. One kind of odd thing here, if you look in 2018, 2019, those railroad properties were valued at $8.4 million, and then it was reduced to 1.8. I couldn't get New York State to tell me why there was such a significant drop. When I look at numbers like that, I think one is wrong, or there was a change in methodology and how they valued it. But I haven't gotten an answer. It's all proprietary information according to New York State.
What does the word ceiling, where does that come from?
That is the highest value that I can put on the railroad property. So I could value it less if I wanted to. I don't know why I'd want to do that, but so that is the ceiling assessment that they can do that. We also have ceiling values for our telecommunications properties that fits in under the public utility as well. I always go to that ceiling value.
Mike?
Two things. Might the change in the railroad have to do with the loss of the coal going into the Milliken station? And so if there's some kind of an income component to whatever the state uses for their ceiling.
It might have. You know, the plant was ramping down at that point. I forget, I think it was the end of 2019 though is when they officially shut down. Because I know at the beginning of COVID, I was working out a vacant land value for that plant. So unless they were anticipating it, or just the fact that less coal was actually going there may have affected that too.
The other thing I wondered about, how is the new municipal cable system in town of Dryden treated?
Yeah. I actually called New York State about that because I wanted some guidance on whether it would be taxable or it would be exempt. And according to what New York State said, it will be exempt under Dryden's municipal use. At least that's their initial determination. So I don't know if New York State will actually value that and give me a figure for it, and I'll have it exempt or not, but it's something that I need to look further into. But at least I got the initial, it's exempt. And once I heard that, then I kind of said it's something you can deal with at that appropriate time. I'm not wasting resources if it's not going to add to our tax base.
Thank you.
The second page just has the dates for the mailings and some of the information that we have, how to schedule that informal assessment review. You can do it online through our form. There's a paper application you can download. There's an application on the back. Send us an email, however you want to do it. I created an easy-to-use sales search application right off of our main page. Just as an easy way, you can put in a range of value and it's going to pull out all of those sales. The search component within our online database isn't that intuitive, so I wanted to give something nice and easy, so I just created that online for us.
Looking at the mailings and the page before you, it shows 319 decreases and 281 increases. Almost everybody's getting a letter then.
Pretty much all the residential properties are. The vacant lands, we didn't change in value this year, but if you own a house, most likely you're getting a letter from us.
Okay, and the decreases, can you categorize them, or is there a type of property that's gone down in value?
I'd say typically two, well, really three. One would be kind of odd special franchise and or public utility properties that would have decreased in value. When a property splits and subdivides into multiple parcels, that may be a property that sees a decrease. And then fire and demolitions as well.
Okay, thanks.
Greg?
Yeah, why not look at vacant land this year?
Based upon the sales that we have seen, we haven't had that need to. We always take a look and say, how do our assessments compare to those sale prices? Last year, we revalued all of the vacant land within the county, so we're really only 1 year behind on those. Vacant land's a little bit odd in how we have to value it. We have to value that in its highest and best use. And most of the vacant land we have around here, its highest and best use is, its current use is being used as, as just farmland, recreational land. We don't have a lot of development sites that don't already have something on it. When there's something on it, we have to value it in its current use. I always use Doc Weiner's old driving range, putt-putt course, batting cages on Elmira Road. When that was there, I had to value it as an entertainment center. But its highest and best use was for big box development. Lowe's, Home Depot, Bed Bath & Beyond. So once they stopped using that as the use, the value went up significantly. It's the same in College Town. The dirt is worth more than the older houses that are up there. So a lot of the times, we actually just had this on the new car wash on Route 13 out there. As vacant land is worth a lot more than once you put the car wash on it, and I have to value a car wash. So oddly enough, that property is going to see a decrease because of the new construction that was put on it.
Got it. Thank you.
So as I mentioned, we mailed out those 8,000 changes. only 434 appointments, or 5.4% of the people coming in. You know, I think people will look online, they'll see their change, and they'll panic and not realize that that increase in assessment is just reapportioning what those prior tax levies were. And not, you know, it's not an automatic 20% increase in your tax bill if you had a 20% increase in your assessment. We recalculate those tax rates and produce what that new tax rate will be and the new tax estimate on there. And people can really see what that would have affected their tax bill if their new assessment and everybody else's new assessment was in place. You know, I can't control tax levies and how they change. I don't want that power. I can only look at what our assessment and how that's affected by that. So I think once people get that notice and they take a look and they actually look at how our assessments are, I think they have a different reaction than when they're online on Facebook or Twitter and going through social media. And the third page, I think, is really telling here. So I have two charts on this third page. One shows the percentage change in assessment. So we had, you know, 105 parcels that saw a decrease in their assessment of 25%. We saw 7,277 parcels that saw an increase of 25% or more. But the second chart on that page is the more important one, in my opinion. This shows what their percentage change in their tax estimate would be, again, if their assessment and everybody's new assessment was in place. So,
and the levy didn't change.
Correct, and the levy didn't change. So with this, 18,274 parcels would see a decrease in their estimated taxes when those are reapportioned. You know, only 12,984 see an increase, and only 6,635 see an increase of 10% or more of that reapportioning of all of the county, town, and school taxes. So it's not that huge of an impact. So another way you can look at this chart is if we didn't do this revaluation this year, 18,274 parcels would have ended up paying more in taxes than what their fair share is. So 18,000 people would have been overtaxed, so to speak. And the 12,984 parcels would be undertaxed. So, you know, our job in the assessment office is to simply value property. We're the same as appraisers going to your property for the bank. You know, I'd love to be able to spend the amount of time that an independent fee appraiser does, but I don't think you really want to increase my budget by $15 million. And even then, it would require all of the property owners to let us into their property. You know, property owners don't even have to let us on their property. You know, we're working with the information we have. We're finding it more difficult to get new information. For example, we haven't received a building permit from the city of Ithaca since September. We're working with them as they work through their technological issues with their new database. So it's different, but also code officers have a different, they do their work and my office does our work. You know, I just went to an inspection on Friday. Code officer said there was just a couple punch list items. So I'm like, oh, this property's gonna be done. You know, I think we have this property severely underassessed when I went to it. I think there was one working toilet in one of the bathrooms. The shower was working in the other. I think the kitchen was just temporary. I don't think they would put, you know, just plywood cabinets in there. So trying to rely on the code officer when the property owner doesn't let us know what's going on, you know, we're only as good as the information that we have available. If we had perfect information, our values would be better, but we don't. So we have to work with what we got, and that's why we hold these informal assessment review meetings each year. This is the best information we got. Come and talk to us. Help us help you. You know, you're not, I talk to a lot of downstate assessors, and they won't change a value unless you sue them. I'm not doing that. We're not perfect. We realize that. So this is that time for a property owner to come on in and help us help them. Finally, on the last page, I gave you what those actual 2024 or 2023 tax rates would have been, and then what the reduction would be in that disclosure rate. Sorry, was that me? Thought I heard someone. So you can kind of see, you know, I reapportioned the county tax. I went through that presentation in February to kind of see where that numbers would go. You know, so most of the school districts, they could drop their tax rate yet again this year. Most school districts have dropped their tax rate pretty much every year in the last 8 at least. I haven't seen too many school districts increase their tax rate over a 3-year period, so those have just been decreasing. But
Okay.
I got any more questions?
All right, couple
We're here.
questions, and then we got to keep moving on. Mike?
We could talk all morning on this.
We could talk all morning on this.
Jay, I sent around an article from Long Island on Nassau County and the problems they were having down there because it hadn't assessed for 4 years. The prices were going up a lot like they are here, probably more. So, and yet they had some kind of a process where if you filed for review, you automatically got dropped to a different level. So you had different properties who had asked for a review and who hadn't, getting different values. There was some discussion in this committee about, well, couldn't we do something each year instead of doing that? I think this was an example of they're trying to do that isn't working out very well for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know what Nassau is trying to do. They're a little bit different. Back in 1938, they created the system that they're living in right now. When they took over that assessment function at the county level, the county guarantees all of the levies, and if there is a correction or a refund that's done, the county then eats that refund. So if they're over-assessing a piece of property and a judge determines that and they have to pay out a refund, here we would reapportion that refund to the school, the town, the villages. The county, when they went countywide, took that responsibility. So they have to bond pretty significantly, is my understanding, each year for those refunds. So I think this freeze is kind of a way to stop some of those lawsuits. It's a whole different animal down there. We're nice, we have 35,000 parcels, we can kind of handle that. But it's just a different animal down there. I don't want to comment too much on it, but I'm appreciative of being here.
Understand. Thank you.
Rich?
I'm going to say Dominic's name at the beginning, so don't surprise him later, because I'm going to come back to Dominic. Jay, I'll just mention at Public Safety last week, somebody visited with us on public comment and called us all cowards as legislators and that we didn't care about human life. So you're not alone. You know, a lot of the public has, at best, ambivalent views of us in our county government, but you certainly get a very acute focus because it's so specific to individual tax bills. And I think all of us on the legislature recognize that you're getting that, and it's not really fair. The document that you gave us, I think in December, the very dense spreadsheet, I shared that again with all my colleagues on the legislature because I think it's so instructive to show the connection between assessments, rates, and levies, and how important it is for the general public to focus on their taxing authority, or us, the legislators, the municipal governments, the school districts, on the levy, on how much we're choosing to spend. And this was, if you haven't seen the video, and it sounds like you haven't watched our meeting, but that, this was essentially the focus of the discussion, was this very complicated interplay where, as a county, I think we've done a really good job in holding our levy down and being really responsible. And it doesn't matter that much when the school districts and the other municipalities are raising their levies dramatically. The overall tax burden on our residents goes way up, and all the governmental units get blamed, including the county and you. We talked about trying to do a task force or some sort of group, a subcommittee, to focus on this. We could certainly do that. I don't know quite where it goes in terms of outcomes. It seems like what we really need is a communication piece here, that you've provided us with tremendously good information in that spreadsheet. And from that, I think we could do, in addition to our web pages, Dominic, that would explain to a member of the public this interplay between assessment, rate, and levy, and do it for the whole county, because it doesn't make sense for us to just say, hey, look, it's not us, the county. The people have the same concern about their taxes, and I believe we could do a much better job on information sharing and education, and it could be pretty straightforward. We could really lead on this, in my view. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm not sure a task force, which is what some of the members of the public suggested, is necessarily needed, but I think people just don't understand, and it's so complex and there's so many parts. So I don't know what that, maybe a task force to work on communication.
Well, maybe the subcommittee that you talked about, but that would be the end goal, is the communication piece. And when you get down to it, it's not that complicated. It is, you generally have, 3 taxing authorities that hit any individual. Maybe, there's water districts or whatever else beyond that, but you just have to understand how those 3 levies play together, and then the assessment and the rate. Yeah.
All right, well, something to talk further about. I'm going to stop us here and thank Jay for coming, and as always, we learn more when you're here. And, if members of the public can listen to this and listen to our meetings and have, hear what we're saying, that could help as well. It's hard to get folks to listen to our riveting meetings. Mike.
Can I just say one thing? Jay, please tell your staff, we know they're getting beat up. We appreciate what they do, and they have our support.
Thank you. I mean, one thing I will say is no phone call has made its way to me yet. So everybody who has called and wanted their assessment reviewed has been great. Very cordial, realize really what we're trying to do. But if I can add one last comment, the school budget vote is May 21st. Last year, 11.42% of the registered voters voted. Sorry, that was in 2022. It decreased in 2023 when I tried to highlight this to 11.12. Only 10% of the registered voters in the Ithaca Consolidated School District voted. That is the biggest tax and the one you can have the most direct impact on, and one that ICSD has said their levy will increase 13 to 14% this year. I've been around a while, and I can remember the county increasing their levy 17.7% once when Medicaid was readjusted. But I've never seen a school district increase their levy that amount.
Amanda, can I ask you, because I know you raised the question about the article in the Ithaca Times that said the school district was going to keep level its tax rate for 3 coming years. Does that mean they're just ignoring the levy?
I guess. I certainly can't speak for them, but yeah, Greg.
Yeah, I think this is this a little bit is the problem. And unfortunately, Jay,
Yeah.
your department is one piece of the equation, and the one that's people I think have probably the closest connection to, right? Because they can pick up the phone and call your office and your team much easier than probably getting through to
The school
board
Yeah.
or another elected official.
Yeah.
And it's this play on growth based on assessed value rather than growth based on population and adding new parcels and adding new residents. And then they can make these clever things like, oh, we're going to keep the rate the same, almost sort of preying on the fact that there's some general confusion amongst the public of, oh, well, the tax rate's the same, but my assessment went up. So people say, well, the school board kept it the same, so it must be the assessment department. And I think, you know, my biggest gripe now is just the fact that we have municipalities, we have school districts that are playing the game like, oh, we're going to keep the rate flat, but actually we're going to grow our levy by X number of percent. So it's not your fault. You're just a piece of the equation, and the most visible, and as Rich's point, the most personal one. So I think we need to really press on our schools and our local municipalities to tighten down so that we can keep Tompkins County affordable.
Thank you. That's,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And yes, thanks to your staff. And thank you for the good discussion. I'm sure we will have you back and we will talk. We should have just a whole meeting just to talk about assessment with Jay.
Just Jay.
Sounds great.
Just Jay.
The just meeting.
I'm always willing to talk, it seems like, so, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, we have not had the History Center here in quite some time, so come on up, Ben, find a spot. There were just two things that had come up to my attention recently that, and I wanted Ben to be here, which is great, thank you. The first thing was that when I met with Ben, as I'm joining the History Center Board of Directors, he let me know that the Board of Directors of the History Center doesn't actually have a seat for the legislature. It's not like a specific thing written into their bylaws. It's just sort of been a like courtesy or a, like, we want you here, you can fit into a spot. So my question was going to be to you all, how do we feel about that? I mean, we can't tell them what to do with their bylaws. They are not an advisory board to our legislature. We don't manage what they do, but is that something that we should reconsider and request of them that we do have a specific seat, because we do give them money every year? So I don't know if you have thoughts on that, or
just to add that Rich, who is previously on our board, was there as like a full trustee, and so you know, was voted on through the process that our board goes through for trustees, and you know, had the same responsibilities that apply to all trustees, from you know, the language around our giving requirements to attendance to and so there wasn't any specific carve out or position that might be worthwhile in thinking. And I know that I always benefit both previously from Rich and now from Amanda of being able to have conversations because of the close relationship between the History Center and the county.
yeah, and I guess my question was more to us, like, I mean, I don't know that we have an official like policy that we will officially designate someone to that board, so I don't know if we want to. Okay, Rich and then Susan.
Just to give a historical perspective on the History Center, when we were doing the building project to go to the Tompkins Center for History and Culture, our county historian, Mrs. Kamen, told me, get on the board. And I did. But that was, Joe Mariano was involved at that point, and Rod Howe, and the discussion was just because of the connection, the financial commitments that were being made, that it really made sense to have that connection. But yeah, nothing formal was done. I'd be happy to have something included, but as long as we're doing it, I don't know that it is critical.
I had Susan and then Mike.
I just had a question about the funding. Can you refresh I can't remember. Is it part of your annual budget, or is it an OTR, or what is it?
Yeah, so we have received OTRs, but there is a general disbursement to the History Center that is in the county's budget. For this year, I believe it's 47.2. And, I think it is historically, with maybe some exceptions for pauses during COVID, that it has increased by, I think, what the county does pretty standard, the 2% for inflation or whatever.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. It seems, because of that, it seems to me that this makes sense.
Yeah.
Have an established liaison as we do with other agencies.
Yeah. Mike?
Don't have a problem with an established liaison. I just wonder about whether we actually need to have an appointment. Thinking like, for example, the library board, we appoint all their members of the board. We don't appoint any of the History Center's members, but they have always wanted to have somebody from the legislature on there because not only do we give them some cash, but we also give them the space over there. And when they were in other locations, we paid the rent, or a big chunk of it anyway. So I don't know whether we need to have a position on that board unless we were having difficulties, but I can't ever remember having problems with them. But I do know, since I've been on this legislature, they've always asked for a legislator to be on their board.
Yeah, there've never been any problems until there are problems, as I've seen in several organizations. I mean, we also give a considerable amount of money to CCE, but we don't approve their, board members, but we have 2 voting seats on that board.
Well, that's interesting. That's true.
Yeah.
Maybe education law that requires the library to have their board members.
Yeah, the education law plays into
Non-voting.
that. Right, at the library, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's fine if it works, and it has worked, but at some point, if it changes and it doesn't work, then, and Ben is gone and the other trustees are gone and they're saying, oh, we actually don't need a legislator on here. We have no, So I don't know. We could leave it and say it's fine or not. Greg?
I think to that point, if there's will and momentum to memorialize it now, it's a easy procedural event that we can do. I would rather just do it than just sort of have to say, didn't we have that conversation? Was it 04? Was 24 we had it? I just think if there's the will to do it now, do it and be done.
Okay. And so my question then, I mean, we can do something on our end to say we would like to have a specific seat on the board, but I think you would have to ask your board if.
Yeah, and obviously I can't speak for my board, but based on the conversations that I've had, I think there have, among my current board composition, there have always been questions of like, well, and I'm going to single you out, Rich, here, because you're the only county ledge that I've had on the board, like, is Rich a full board member? And so all of these requirements that we do have in order to be in that position, do they apply to the Rich? Do they not apply to Rich? And so I think it would be really welcome on my board's part, and it would shock me if it wasn't a unanimous approval.
Okay, so I might look at Katrina and say, would we pass like a resolution that says we're requesting to have a specific seat on their board pending their approval?
I would suggest that they have added to their bylaws, and then I think that we've expressed that we are supportive of that, and once it's added to the bylaws, we can make that appointment accordingly.
Okay.
Do you have sample language from previous county ledge actions for establishing these kind of positions so that we can sort of reflect that in what we put in or what changes we might make?
I can go ahead and do some research for you and
Thank you.
drop it in an email to you. Okay, Ben?
So maybe we could bring that up at the next board meeting and just say, this is what we'd like to do, get people's feedback, and then, I don't know when they're looking at their bylaws again, but.
We do it on a rolling basis whenever
okay.
something comes up. So,
Okay.
you know, I like to have a little bit of a runway. And so maybe introducing it just as a topic at our March meeting. Our board meetings are open to the public, so anybody is welcome to come whenever they want. But we meet the third Thursdays. And so I have time to introduce that this month. And then, you know, given that this isn't reinventing the wheel, I think we should be able to have a vote at our April meeting.
Great. Mike?
Oh, I was just going to say, we don't approve their bylaws, do we?
No.
So
We would just,
The change would have to
submit
be-
to New York State.
directly to them.
Yeah, it would be a request and a discussion, so. Okay, that's great. Thank you. All right, next History Center item was instigated by our chair, Mr. Klein. I put him on the spot. But it also goes to something that the History Center Board has been dealing with or starting to consider is what do they do when entities come and say, we would like an artifact that we want to hang on the wall, and how did they deal with that, and what does that look like, and what's the procedure? And as Ben has said a couple times, they have some paintings or maps or something in the governor's mansion, but you know, the governor's side takes care of reminding them and sending annual updates and whatever. But so they're kind of working out their process for how do we deal with that. But Dan has had some ideas about expanding what kind of historical artifacts we have in our buildings. And can we get some more? And what would we like? And where would we like to put them in various buildings? So obviously this chambers, but we have lots of other buildings, and you have lots of artifacts that we could be displaying in other places. So I don't know if you... Okay, so I guess part of it was just to have a discussion with you all about what that might look like, if you have opinions, you know, we don't have to like go into deep specifics at this moment, but just to put it out there that this is something we maybe want to consider. Susan?
So are we looking for policy and procedure, or is that what it would lead to? Is that what we're talking about?
Kind of. I mean, I think,
So
yeah.
we have long had specific loaning policies for collecting and exhibition institutions. So like we know exactly what to do when a museum comes and asks, can we borrow this for an upcoming exhibit? And it has been more loosey-goosey around, you know, if a body like the county legislature or the governor's mansion comes. And so we're reshaping our internal policies about lending out, you know, what we need in the environment, what we want to be able to provide in care. But that I think this is from the institutional standpoint, this is an exciting opportunity for us to get all of the stuff that we are preserving on behalf of the public into public spaces where they might be able to enjoy them and broaden that reach outside of our museum walls.
So I'll just say that the Johnson Museum at Cornell, I don't believe they still do it, but they used to have a program like that where offices across the campus could borrow. I know the libraries up there borrowed a lot of materials.
So similarly, my undergrad institution, the art museum there, infamously, you know, they did a art rental program where you could get a piece of art for $5. The line started days in advance and you had to be in your spot because they were, and I'm not saying we would do this, but they were lending out like Picasso was the famous one, and the first person in line could get that and hang it in their dorm room. I'm sure my board and my staff would have my head if I advocated for maybe some of our rare things, but there's, you know, a lot of pieces from artifacts, archival materials that I think are of profound public interest, relevant to the issues that you all have to deal with on a regular basis, and might offer some historical perspective into current conversations.
Right. I think TCPL actually, when they were in the old location under Janet Steiner, also loaned out paintings and things. So this is very interesting to me. So
Yeah. Mike?
You've got a loan policy. If we're going to accept any, then we need a policy. And among other things is who insures it. When somebody steals it or defaces it or something like that. And hopefully that never happens, but God, there's somebody who's just throwing tomato soup at the Mona Lisa, so you never know what's going to happen.
Well, I hope they don't throw tomato soup at Daniel Tompkins in the back there. But you never know.
You never know, but that's something we would have to do if we were going to do that. I think having more items that you folks thought worthy of display would be a great idea. Over the years, I think, because you've become even a more educationally oriented institution, there's a lot of stuff that people don't get to see most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Rich?
Yeah, I think this is a lot of work, but it's worth doing. Most people wouldn't have a sense of how big the archives are at the History Center and what never really gets to see the light of day. Giving more opportunities makes great sense. I really like the pictures, the program from a few years ago where there's photographs up around the community in both commercial and non-commercial settings that I think add a lot to what's out there.
So you and your board are developing, they're talking about policy.
And if there's an appropriate person on your end to share this with, like we have built our loan policy to other collecting institutions off resources provided by the American Alliance for Museums. And they have some pretty robust resources for how to approach this that I don't see why that can't also be a starting point for whatever the county needs on its side. And to Mike's point that, it talks about insurance and coverage of that. It talks about environmental conditions. And that might be a valuable point if there is a person that is willing to work with me back and forth on that.
I know just the person, Lisa and Bridget. We love policies in this committee.
Do we have anything on loan at this point?
I don't.
There are a couple of stuff unless you've taken them down. No, okay. So there has been some stuff on long-term loan in the chair's office. So if you poke your head right around there, you'll see, I think it's 3 paintings. I would have to check our records. Rich is going in, he can confirm.
Go on.
Could you send us a copy of the list of what we have?
Yeah, to my knowledge, it is just what is currently in the chair's office.
So,
to give you a time scale on that, it still credits the DeWitt Historical Society. So it predates our name change in 2000.
We'd like to have you change it back.
So maybe as you and when you come up with your policy, you can share that with us and we can kind of go from there. I don't know, do you feel like we need our own separate policy?
This would be about care and
acceptance
for things on loan, because we have a policy on gifts and accepting gifts and donations, but this is a little bit different. Yeah, we'd have to look into it and see.
Okay. All right, great. Rich?
Maybe it just could be an amendment to that policy.
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
All right, good discussion. Our chair is nodding. Rich?
Just an addendum, I had COVID, so I didn't get to the opening, but if you could give 2 sentences about your new exhibit.
Totally, and I want to thank, I know I saw several familiar faces at our public opening, but at the beginning of February, we opened a sporting chant on and off the field, highlighting local history of sports in our community. I think we're consciously staying away from Cornell and IC sports and really trying to hone in and focus on stories of what it means to sort of compete and experience that sort of joy together within a community and how that's shaped and changed over centuries here in Tompkins County. We've had a great reception so far. I know just this morning a flurry of emails working with some of the different teams. One of the teams focusing on is the Special Olympics that have been here recently. We always try to have recent and far back sports. And so I know we've got some particularly exciting stuff about this last Special Olympics that is being held in Tompkins County coming this June that we're excited to be able to collaborate on. And it's also really expanded new artifacts that have come into the museum. This is another important point about exhibits. Some of you may be sick to death of hearing me phrase it this way, but you know, our primary goal and sort of task, the reason we're incorporated is to preserve these materials for future generations that want to learn about us. And so whenever we do an exhibit, yes, we have a great time sharing narratives with our current community, but it's an opportunity to expand our collections to potentially answer future questions of folks in 7 generations' time. So if you haven't had a chance to come, please do come. We've got exciting events coming up sort of through this sporting theme, and really sort of we're excited to pair with the Global Olympics in Paris in July and be able to reflect that back into what that means locally here in Tompkins County. And then two more plugs. One is just based on what came before me. We recently finished a project digitizing all of the 1954 tax assessment photographs. And I will have to reach out, and I didn't catch his name, but I don't believe photographing all of the properties when you do the tax assessment is part of that process anymore. But this snapshot into this fixed point in time of our community, this comprehensive photograph collection of the built environment in 1954 is really astounding, and the value it brings to us today, to researchers across all kinds of different demographics, is pretty exciting. So we were really happy to get this up onto the web. And now I have a lot of questions about, you know, what's happening now with our tax assessment. So.
Great. And I was thinking at some point this year, I'd love to have you give everybody like a demonstration, a walkthrough of the History Forge. Like, show us how it works.
Absolutely. For folks new or just needing a reminder, History Forge is a digital application that we've coded here in-house, and it combines census records into a Google Map overlay and historical maps, and the project allows you to create maps of every homeowner who worked at the Ithaca Gun Company in 1890 and in 1920. And you can see the exodus of gun workers from the city of Ithaca out of the city of Ithaca as the demographic of who lives where changes over time. One of the more sort of, it is the thing that allows us to have an impact at a national scale. We have testing partners in, and my staff is going to kill me because I won't get them all. We've got 3 or 4 partners across New York State, but we also have 2 partners in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Orleans, Oklahoma, California, Montana, Virginia, and I won't get the last one.
Cool. Well, we will have you back.
Great.
And we'll learn all about that. But thank you for being here.
Thank you all. I appreciate the support.
Yeah, good to see you. Okay. Board of Elections, we have a resolution. I see Alana is here. This is a budget adjustment, Board of Elections reallocation of grant money from 2023 to 2023. Is that correct? It should be 2024, I think.
Yes, 2024.
Okay. So the title needs to change. Can I have somebody move that? Greg moves, seconded by Susan. Questions, comments? All right, all in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. I think.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Alana, I just wondered, our new voting machines that calculate the ballots, who is the manufacturer of those?
Clear ballot.
Clear Ballot, okay.
Yes.
Because I was just reading an article in some municipality in California where they've jettisoned their counting machines made by Dominion, and they're going to make their staff go to counting paper ballots. I hope we never have to get into that.
I hope not to.
All right. Great. Thanks for being here, Alana. We are going to move on to administration, and we have a couple different things. We have an update about the grants consultant, and that looks like Bridget's going to talk to us.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I wanted to provide just a brief update on one of the more significant projects we've undertaken within county administration, and that is an update on the work we've been doing with our grants consultant. So as you'll recall, through the 2023 budget process, the legislature authorized $100,000 in funding to support the work of either a grants manager and or a consultant to best position the county for federal funding. After some discussion among county administration and our Department of Planning, we decided to contract with a consultant to do the following objectives. Initially, we would like to conduct an assessment on the organizational capacity of the county to apply for and manage federal, state, and private grants, provide recommendations on the best practices, policies, and procedures, provide trainings to relevant county staff on grants applications and management, and to obviously seek and apply for funding on behalf of and support of county departments. So following a RFP process, we selected 11th House Solutions as the consultant to work on those initiatives in June of 2023. Immediately, the consultant began a process of interviewing every single department head, as well as any staff involved in grants management within those departments, and presented to us a grant audit and recommendations document in September of 23. This document it started off with an overall picture of where we're at as a county in terms of our grants application management processes and procedures and recommendations, but then it also went department by department and went through those elements as well, providing us a really good picture of where not only our organization is at in terms of being ready to apply for and manage funding, but also where each department is at. And what we very quickly learned is that our departments were very much all over the map. Some of our departments are well-versed or well-practiced in applying for and managing large federal funding, state funding, et cetera. And some of our departments really had no experience or very minimal experience in that. So this is just a quick snapshot. It's not anything I expect you to read, but this is sort of just what a page out of that aforementioned document looks like. This is what we found countywide, and it walks through, why it matters that we have these things, and then specific recommendations countywide that we should implement to better position us to be successful in obtaining and managing funding. As I said, this was done for every single department, and I would be happy to share that information if anyone is interested. So what did we then do with these recommendations? So with the help of our consultant, as I mentioned, we very quickly realized that we really needed to do a better job of centralizing within our county organization how we are keeping oversight and knowledge of what departments are interested in applying for, what they're including in their applications, making sure that they're thorough and correct, and having a good bird's eye view of if departments are interested in certain funding opportunities, that they're aware that there may be opportunities to partner with other departments. So really taking that overall bird's eye view, as I mentioned, an organizational assessment of how we can better position ourselves to be successful in getting some of this funding. So what came out of that is a working policy document and best practices that was provided to us by our consultant in September. We have since then been very doggedly working on an updated grants management administrative policy. We worked very closely with our finance department and other central administration departments to really pull together a comprehensive policy that we can share with you all and then implement throughout our departments. And what the crux of the policy will be is that we will be centralizing all grants application and management procedures through the county administration department. As you can see here, the goal is to have that policy undergo review and be presented to this committee, I'm hoping next month, April, and then be able to implement the processes themselves starting in May. And how we are anticipating to do this is to build a workflow through our OpenGov software system that enables the key departments, those central administration departments, to be aware of when departments are applying or interested in applying for grants, and us be able to authorize that they go ahead and apply, and that we're centralizing all of the requirements and that the reporting, all of that is sort of centralized in one place so that we have much better oversight of those grants. And then finally, the consultant sort of parallel to this process in terms of outlining best practices, was also working to compile a prospectus of various funding opportunities that are out there, largely federal, but also some state and more private foundation, et cetera, opportunities. And that document was provided to us in December of 2023, again by department. That information was shared with the departments, and as we moved through this process of developing this policy, departments were encouraged to reach out to our grants consultant and work with them directly on any technical assistance that they might need if they were interested in applying for grant opportunities. I should state that throughout this entire relationship with the consultant, they have been ready and available to meet with departments if they've had an interest or need any assistance in applying for funding. So that has been ongoing as we work to centralize the process. So sort of just building off of that, as you can see here, this is what is currently ongoing. As I mentioned, individualized grant consulting and training with departments upon request. I've cited a few of the departments that have had some success working with our consultant. We have, when I speak about centralizing under county administration, one of the pieces of that is making sure that one department is responsible for all of the management of what are called UEI, or unique entity identifiers, which is what you're required to have in order to apply for federal funding. So we've moved the management of that, as well as the management of the accounts through sam.gov, which is the website through which you apply for federal funding, under the purview of our compliance officer within county administration. And we worked very closely with finance to make sure all of that has been moved over appropriately. We are working on rolling out the policy, and then we'll be doing a significant amount of departmental training to make sure everyone is up to speed on the new processes and procedures as they relate to grants. And the hope is that this will position us in a much better spot to apply for federal grant applications as they begin to roll out in the summer and fall of 2024. And then finally, we also learned through our consultant that while Tompkins County is in a relatively good spot in its commitment to DEI, due to some updated requirements through the Biden administration, there is what's called the Federal Justice 40 Initiative, which I was not familiar with prior to working with the consultant. But this initiative really sort of requests or requires that applicants beef up their commitment to DEI and also J, the justice element. So been working closely with Charlene. It's been fortuitous that she came on board at this time as well, to make sure that we are laying the groundwork, we're doing the equity baseline assessment, and that we're mapping strategically the objectives that we will be accomplishing in order to achieve our goals in the areas of DEIJ. So that has also been ongoing in partnership with the consultant. And then just a couple additional slides around the Justice 40 initiative. I don't know much about it, like I initially said, but it's something you can look up and spend some time reviewing. It's quite interesting. It is a goal that 40% of the overall benefits of certain climate, clean energy, affordable and sustainable housing and other investments from the federal government are directly impacting disadvantaged communities, particularly those overburdened by pollution. And all of the programs are required to ensure opportunities for local community members to be engaged in the process and to report data on the benefits. So these are the elements that would be required if you were to receive any of these federal funding opportunities. And finally, just to reiterate, in order for us to be most competitive in the applications for some of these federal grant opportunities, we need to demonstrate a commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as the justice component that was really stressed by our consultant. We need to continue our work in building more robust means of collecting data on impacted communities. This is work that we've started to undertake with Dominic and Charlene, but we need to move forward on that in order to, again, be competitive in this arena. And then just to reiterate what I already stated around the work that Charlene has been doing, establishing a baseline equity scorecard and really developing that clear strategy to achieve goals in the area of DEIJ. And that is my update.
Great, thank you. Questions, comments? Mike, then Rich, then Susan, then Greg.
Nice presentation. There's a lot of meat there about what we've been working on. And I'm glad to see that moving ahead because we need to make sure we aren't missing opportunities for grants. Wondered, some of us have been talking about, from time to time, we get requests for projects that might be, we might get federal earmarks for, or state legislature initiative proposals. And then we sometimes we're sitting around thinking, well, what projects might we use? Would this process in any way be able to help us keep a list of things that we would like to do?
Yes, and I really appreciate that question because we're in the process of thinking of projects for congressional earmarks as we speak, and that is exactly what I hope this centralization would do, is have a component of which we are sort of keeping a running list of projects that we would like to apply for funding for.
That's great.
Yep.
I think Rich was next.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, because in fact, I was just having a conversation a short while ago saying, what happened with grant? It seems like this $100,000, which is a lot of money, and we struggled, did we really want to do this in the 23 budget, has presented the opportunity for a tremendous amount of leverage in terms of actual grant dollars that we can get out of it. Have you seen that? Do you agree with that? Or do you think it's still waiting for us to get that leverage?
Yeah, I would say that while we haven't, I can't point to, yes, we received this award because of this consultant. I think continuing to work with the consultant, we will get there as we work towards that fall timeframe. I think where the investment has been in that assessment of where our organization was at and its capacity and its, as you mentioned, its competitiveness. And that, I think, has been the real benefit of working with the consultant, because they've given us a clear roadmap as to how we can leverage our resources in order to get more. Mm-hmm.
And follow up, it sounded like some departments are regular grant users and they're consistent, but we've got lots of departments that never think about grants, and I assume that in fall of '24 we're going to see much broader grant applications across lots more departments.
Yes, that would be the hope. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a component of this, which I just briefly mentioned, is that ongoing training of all of our departments in the basic mechanics of finding grants, applying for them, and then managing them. Mm-hmm.
Susan.
I actually had a question about the list too, but that was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Being new again to GO this year, some of the things you mentioned happened last year. Just curious if any of the reports that were provided by the consultant were shared with this committee, or if they could be. You talked about like a department by department assessment. I think it would be at least helpful for me to understand, again, not wanting to get into the weeds and let departments run their departments, but just understanding.
Of course.
So anything that you could share with us on, I think you mentioned like a grant audit or their initial assessment, would be just kind of helpful for us to get a baseline. And then I guess a question for you and or Lisa is, looking to this year and beyond, is any part of like performance dialogue or metrics, grants applications or grants received, grants administration with departments, so that we can encourage departments and hold department heads accountable for making sure that grants and additional funds or priorities coming into their department?
That hasn't been a standard part of performance dialogues because not all departments are positioned in that way, but certainly for departments where grant management is part and parcel of what they do, it is a big part of those conversations.
Great, okay, perfect, thank you.
And yes, I'll share the documents after this meeting.
Awesome, thanks.
All right, great, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Yeah, it was very good to get an update on
You
all
bet.
that. Okay, department goals of departments that report to this committee.
So again, we attached the department goals for each of the departments that report to GO, including county administration and others. And it's just an item if people have questions about any of the goals mentioned. We and others are here to talk about them.
All right, have folks had a chance to read through the many, many goals? Rich?
I did have a question for Lisa. You've got 22 goals here. Do you have a top three?
No, that's a good question.
No, I don't. I probably have a top 10.
I appreciate the work you put into this, but my concern is if you have 22, maybe you don't have any. That this is so big. I worry that 22 is too many.
Yeah. I think in part it is a reflection of all that's going on and the responsiveness. I mean, I couldn't say labor agreements aren't a goal. They're a necessity. Same with policy updates. A lot of these are initiatives that are shorter in time span in terms of the strategic operations plan that we'll be finalizing, but then we'll be implementing it. There are a lot of goals around the capital projects that we're more involved in these days than others, and launching new programs where, like the rapid medical response, while we ourselves are not launching the program, we're doing a lot around it. So it's a difficult thing to prioritize exactly, and this is, we have a small staff involved in these, but we are also working together with the legislature and many departments on these goals. So I don't know how to
Answer that.
answer that.
I'm wondering if maybe you take out the stuff that you have to do, like budget development, and you look at initiatives that are in some sense discretionary and figure out, yeah, we're going to add additional effort to these things.
I think in some ways the visual is also helpful to legislators because
to see
I did not include department head performance reviews or day-to-day management or breathing. All of those are necessities, but I think it's a reflection of the full plates that we have, and if there are additional items that come up, task forces and so forth, something's got to give. So et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just points to what you just said. I mean, how much you're dealing with over the whole organization. It's not just your little department, you know? So it's important for us to see all of this, I think. Greg?
I had the similar reaction of like, wow, you know, you guys got a lot going on. You know, so it definitely is helpful to see it in this way for me, especially. And, you know, I'm just thinking, okay, are there resources available to help support these efforts? Because they are critical, they are in the moment, they do have to get done. And to your point, you have to breathe, and you have to live, and you have to have a life away from work. So I appreciate seeing it in its totality. I think, Rich, what you're maybe asking about is seeing it maybe structured slightly different. But speak up if there's something you need, because a lot of this stuff has to get done. And it's a lot of things that the 14 of us have asked you and your department to take on. So we appreciate it.
And I just remember, this is the pared down list, actually. We have a fuller list that we're working from interdepartmentally.
Like I've always said, leadership has its privileges.
That's right.
Right, and you're supervising all of the other departments, you know, let alone projects and day-to-day operations. So, yeah, Susan.
When I look at this, what I see is this is a great list, and I see that you as administrator are going to be on a constantly rolling priority setting basis, because you've got it all listed for us to see, but you know what has to happen now, what has to happen in 3 months. I've got to work with this department, and so I trust that you will set this up in terms of what is the priority this month, 3 months, 6 months, and come to us and let us know how we can help. Certainly willing to help in any way.
I would just ask Katrina or Holly, do you have anything to add to your sections or anything you want to say about your goals? You don't have to. But.
No, I mean, they're obviously pretty general, and that's just because every day is different in my office, and it's kind of hard to set goals because you don't know what's going to come in on any given day. But yeah, I think those are some general goals that would really improve our office over the next year.
Great. Rich?
Legistar, when do you anticipate rolling that out?
At this point, I don't know.
Okay. That's the answer.
There's some issues going on, so I'll keep you updated. If you want to talk after the meeting, I can explain.
Okay.
And since it's on the list, I would just ask, where are we with the advisory board bylaws updates?
The bylaws have been sent out, and You're getting responses? We're getting responses. I think a couple have been completed.
Okay, great.
Brittany was keeping a list of where we're at with them.
If you need us to nudge any of our boards, let us know. We can do that.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments on these goals? All right. Well, thank you for pulling that all together. It's important for us to see that. And we do have one resolution, which is a budget adjustment, county administration budget adjustment appropriation of unspent 2023 funds for Chief Equity Diversity Officer. Can somebody, Greg moves that, Rich seconds. Anything to say about it?
These were unspent in 2023 that we're requesting for use in 2024. Charlene is on the Zoom if you have further questions about details.
Questions, comments? I think we're all set. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. While we're on administration, any other updates you want to give us today?
No, I think we've covered them. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Okay, moving on to various legislature items. I just wanted to, for the board, for everybody's, clarification, just talk about our liaison appointments, assignments. There's, Katrina added a page, thank you very much, or one of the clerks did. Mike Lane was appointed to the Historical Commission last year, and he has another year on that. I assume you're good with that, Mike? And
So this is the date it was appointed, because it says expires December 31st, 2024.
right, I think we appointed or assigned you last year, and it's a 2-year.
23 and 24, you're
Yeah.
saying? Okay. Yes, I'd like to stay on that group.
All right.
Somebody's got to let them in.
And we had our conversation about the History Center, so that's going to be changing. And I guess, I don't know, maybe in the future we would add that to the list of this committee's liaisons. And then we have the Public Information Advisory Board and the Tompkins County Public Library. And Rich and I did a switcheroo this year, and he's going to be moving to the library board, and I'm moving to the History Center board. So I assume you're still good with that publicly?
Absolutely. No, that's great.
So that will change. And I've been the liaison to the Public Information Advisory Board for numerous years. Happy to open it up if anybody else would like to take that on. They meet once a month, usually about an hour on Zoom. Dominic is always there to give updates, and it's usually very informative. The group has had some more members come in since they wrote an op-ed last year and sort of alerted the community like, oh, there is this group, and there is more communication needed between government and the public. So anyone want to jump into a new appointment, assignment? Mike?
I will try. I was on it a few years ago, as long as it's not a big commitment of time. But one thing I would think that this might be the quote-unquote task force that needs to be talking about our assessment and how we can get better information out to the public.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I don't know. I would look at Dominic. Do you feel like do you want to say if that makes sense to you?
I think that group, I'm not sure they would may be the best for the entire task force, but maybe the public information.
Well, that's what that's what we were kind of talking about, was how to get the information out.
Yeah, I think there are some members of that group who would be helpful with that. I don't know. We could add it to the agenda and discuss it over the next couple months.
Yeah, I mean, the group does a lot of support of Dominic and talking through issues, and they did write the op-ed last year. They don't do a ton of, work, but it's a lot of discussions. They are planning this meet and greet with. You should remind everybody about that, Dominic, with the newspaper people. But it's generally, a discussion group and come up with ideas, give support, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would concur. I'm not sure the work of deciding exactly how best to inform the public on that issue would live within the typical duties of that group. Though there are people who have experience, Bruce Estes, who used to be the editor of the Ithaca Journal and used to write about these issues or edit articles on these issues frequently, is the chair of that board. I wouldn't want to lose his perspective, for example. So he may be someone from that board who could participate in a task force, for example, or something like that, where, possible.
I guess I'm a little confused here. I thought that our Public Information Advisory Board, going back many years, often would take up the issue of how do we bring out the budget to the population? Do we put on meetings or dog and pony shows out in the suburbs, which we've done in the past? I thought it was a little broader what we were doing.
I mean, I think they are happy and willing to talk about any issue. What I've seen is, I mean, the number of people has dwindled in my time. And then it's kind of very recently gone back up a little bit. And very well-intentioned, very thoughtful folks, but they don't, I mean, it was hard to get a person to be the chair. We still need somebody. Patty Poist has been the secretary for many, many years, and somebody needs to take over for that, because that's, you know, the bylaws say you need to rotate every 2 years or something. So it's a little hard, like with many boards, to get folks to, you know, say, I'm going to work on this outside of our meeting time. I think what tends to happen is that people will discuss something, have a good conversation, but the work falls on the staff to do. And we, you know, they can only, we can't really assign Dominic more work to do. So I don't know if that answers your question, but while it's an engaged group, they're not actively planning events without the help of Dominic. So.
I'll try it.
Okay. Great. Can you include him in emails? And
Absolutely.
yeah, and it's very, you know, very informational for sure, and lots of good conversations. So, Greg?
Yeah, this is just on the totality of the liaison assignments. Yesterday at HED, we had some cleanup to do, and we ultimately just sort of read off the slate and then took sort of a motion vote to sort of memorialize it that way. It kind of talking with Katrina, what's the best process for that?
Yeah.
Because there were some, I know within my committee that were appointed but never necessarily had the formality. So if without objection from you, if it would make sense to maybe memorialize this with a sort of just a reading of who it is and then a vote, or ask for any dissent from any members or anything like that.
Could definitely do that. Rich?
I apologize, I have another commitment I have to leave.
Right, okay.
But I did just want to register my thoughts that on the resolution regarding succession for this year, I suggest we just go back to seniority so we get it done and have further discussion as to how we could change it to committee or something else in future years.
Okay, noted.
And I support the change to the blue card. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, and we should move on from this, but that's a good suggestion, Greg. So correct me if I'm wrong, but we have Tompkins County Public Library would be Rich John, Public Information Advisory Board would be Mike Lane, and continuing on the Historical Commission would also be Mike Lane.
And you would have a liaison
to the History Center.
To the History Center.
Yeah.
So I would
officially
second that if that was a motion by you.
That was a motion to put that in the books.
Okay.
Okay, everyone in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And thanks for participating in the boards, and you know, it's added work, but it's very important. Okay, adoption of revised sign-in form for public speaking at legislative meetings. I feel like we talked about this, but we also put it off, and so I don't know how much full discussion we've had, but this came up a couple months ago, just when we've had some really packed rooms, and people making noises when other people were speaking, or you know, yelling, or other general gestures or whatnot. And so we had talked about amending the blue card, which is here in your packet, potentially to add a sentence that says, I agree to be courteous and not make comments, gestures, outbursts, or other disruptions while other members of the public or legislators are speaking. And I think what folks have said is that, you know, this technically would only apply to somebody who's signing this blue card and turning it in. If there's other people in the public, you know, we can't force them to do such things. But the goal would be to set the tone and also give the chair something to sort of fall back on as here's our, you know, general policy. Mike?
I just want to move it.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Mike moves, seconded by Greg. So all that said, other questions, comments? Yeah, and I think it would just be on the chair at any given meeting to remind folks that this is how we expect you to behave while you're here. And if there are disruptions, you know, we will ask people to leave. Okay, all in favor? That's unanimous. Well, that was easy. Thanks for putting that together, Katrina. Okay, our committee goals, I've had lots of people tell me lots of different things they think that we should work on this year. So I am just going to read the list I have, but I welcome you all to add or give up ideas on things that you want to discuss this year. So we've got looking again at our local mileage policy and reimbursements for legislators. Dan had sent me a question about language in the resolution for the IDA appointments, which I think he might have shared with you too, Katrina, and I don't have that off the top of my head what they're, yeah, but anyway, it was a smallish thing about the language in some resolution, so we'll at some point look at that.
Amanda, I think it was the language that's a chair's appointment, but then it's reaffirmed at the legislature by resolution because we have to send a certified copy to Secretary of State.
So just making those
I think it's just kind of changing, yeah.
Okay. Well, that shouldn't be too terribly difficult. In the past, we haven't had the History Center fall under this committee. It did a long time ago, and then it got moved, and now it's back with us. So it was good to have Ben here today. I'd like to get him to give us some more updates this year, as well as our county historian. I'm not sure that we've ever even had our new county historian come in since she got appointed. So I'd like to have her come in. Later this year, our local law about virtual meetings is going to expire, and we'll need to discuss that and talk about what we want to do and what's possible. We will, as we all know, elections law is changing, and we will need to consider what impact that's going to have on us and on the charter, and looking at that. And also, in our next legislature, we will have 16 legislators instead of 14, and we should consider that at some point. And does that matter in the charter or in our rules, or we should just have a conversation about if there's anything we need to consider there? Probably this summer, no later than this fall, we need to talk about the salaries of the next legislature and what we would want to set those salaries at prior to anyone's announcements of whether they will be running again for the next term. And then I hope at some point we will get the library bylaws and that they will send those back to us and that we will have a positive conversation with them and that we can approve those for them. So that's my list. So I will look at everyone else and see what else you want to get on the goal list this year, if anything. Mike.
Really good list. Thank you for that. You talked about a couple of things. We might have to look at the charter. It might be a good idea to kind of review through the charter itself. I'm not talking about the kind of in-depth thing we do when we have a charter committee, which I think we're a couple years out before we have to do that. But we might want to look at some of the provisions and I think it would be helpful to get everybody up to speed on what's in the charter. We don't really look at that. Everybody gets handed a copy of it, but doesn't necessarily, as new people coming on, don't necessarily see a lot of it operate. So I would think, similar to, what you've done in the past with, like the rules or even the Robert's rules, if we, take a couple of things and just say, hey, these are in the charter. I think they're 16 or 18. Maybe there's more than that sections in the charter. Yeah, there are quite a few, but a lot of them, I think reviewing certainly the sections on the legislature itself, the redistricting committees and things like that would be a good thing to keep in mind. It's not impossible for us to redistrict again before 25 if we wanted to. Take a look at what the state just did twice. I'm not saying that we're going to do that, but it's something, things have changed. We're going to go to 3-year terms, for example, and
for one cycle.
For one
cycle.
term,
For one cycle, but it's, yes, I said that wrong. We'll go to a 3-year term initially. But, so I just thought I would expand on what you were saying there. I think it's important that we look at the charter.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea, and I'm sure we've all read parts of it, but maybe only a few of us here have actually read the whole thing. So I'd be happy to, look through and include a section each time, if only for just reading, we wouldn't even necessarily have to discuss. But Susan?
I would second that, just as I've been on the legislature a year, feel like I'm understanding, that would be a fantastic thing to go through, and I think it would be probably in general for all of the legislature.
Okay, great. Other ideas, goals? Have to thank Katrina for half of that list, so. Obviously, we can certainly add other things. There will be many more things that come up, but I know those are things that we definitely want to make sure we cover this year. Okay, thank you. All right, we still have a bit of time. We are going to talk about the order of succession in the absence of the chair and vice chair. And I think this came up a month ago at the legislature, and the resolution did not pass to set who would fill these roles. Katrina has provided quite a bit of information, sections of the charter and in the rules. She also sent me an email, and now I can't find the paper, but with the way that it had worked for the past 20 years. And each year, she printed this out, each year she lists who was in that list of succession. And from 2003 until 2013, there weren't specific names. It was listed Chair, Budget and Capital Committee, Chair, Public Safety Committee, Chair, Government Operations Committee. So for that 10 years, they weren't designating a specific person. In 2014, began a designation of specific people: Leslyn McBean Claiborne, Kathy Luz Herrera, Nathan Shinagawa. And I can't necessarily say what the reasoning for those were. Mike might be better able to say, but that wouldn't have been seniority because Nate Shinagawa was not a senior member. So anyway.
I don't remember what actually caused the change, except there was some discussion in this committee, just do it by seniority, and then, but it really doesn't matter.
Sorry.
Susan?
What were the committees, budget and capital?
Well, every year it's different.
Okay. Well, I mean, I was interested in that there wasn't a person, it was
It was just, yeah, so in 2019, it was the chair of Health and Human Services Committee, then Public Safety, then BCP.
Okay.
In 2012, it was Health and Human Services Committee, then Government Operations, then Budget. So for some reason.
It was, remember Frank Proto used to chair Health and Human Services, and he was the longest serving member on the legislature. I think that may have to do with it, too.
Interesting. Right, because, well, in 08, it was the PDEC committee chair was the first one. So I guess the point of this is that it's whatever we want it to be. And it doesn't have, you know, for all we know, the years when they actually chose people, it was, you know, a popularity contest. I don't know. I have no idea. I'll stop talking, Greg.
I like the idea of just listing committees and listing a number of committees. I think we elect the chair, we elect the vice chair, and they work together to assign committee appointments. And so if we just say, you know, it's the committees in this order, we memorialize that some way in either a policy or an update to the charter at some point, or the rules. I don't know where it would fall.
I think if we passed a resolution, the charter dictates that we need to do it.
Do it, got it.
You'd have to do a local law to change the charter.
Got it, okay. So maybe we just put a policy that this is the practice. But, you know, in my mind, you think of government operations, they have the most connection to most of the senior staff, budget, BCP as well, public safety, health and human services. So if we listed those four, I think it kind of makes sense.
I think it also makes sense to list the name of the committee, because if a person, you know, if the legislator who is the chair of Health and Human Services leaves the legislature or moves to another city, then it could, you know, that person would change. So
making it about the position, not necessarily the people,
right.
I think takes any sort of real debate out of it, because it's just, this is what you are, these are appointed by the chair.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I agree. I guess I'm not sure if we would need to do, like, we do it yearly.
And that's where, that comes from the charter. The charter dictates that
We do it
annually.
yearly. Okay. Annually designate. But does that preclude a policy or that says, I guess, do we want to set in stone, like, here's the order going forward? Or do we want to just say it happens every year and am I making any sense?
Well, I mean,
Yes.
it can't be set in stone because it keeps changing according to what they have to do. So we may set it for this year, and maybe next year somebody wants us to change it. But it seems to me more neutral to have it by committees, and that committee, the way you suggested it, makes sense to me.
Yeah. Okay.
Because generally, sorry, I'm interrupting myself, but for those committees, it seems like the chairs are ones who have a lot of experience, and that's one of the things that we need, or chair and vice chair.
So.
And this is a just in case scenario anyway.
Yeah. The other thing to notice is that in the early aughts, they listed at least 5 people or 5 positions, and then by 08 it was down to 3. So I wonder if we want to go back to having at least 4 in case. I mean, my other thought was, like, if we had the Health and Human Services chair as first, right now that's already our vice chair, so that we would just go to the next person, but then there's only 2 more on the list. So maybe it makes sense to have 4 listed if we're going to do it by chair title. Yeah.
I don't know if we can, or how, what procedurally, if we can make a motion to, for this year, have something put forward for the next legislature meeting that lists the order of succession as GO chair, BCP chair, public safety chair, and then health and human services chair.
Sure.
And so that's what I would motion.
Okay. Is there a second to that? Okay. And then just in terms of procedurally, if we make a motion right now, could you write that into a document that we would then take to the legislature?
I can prepare a resolution for the.
But we wouldn't have to wait till our next committee meeting?
No, as long as you're authorizing me to do that.
Okay. So say again what you're suggesting.
GO, government, sorry, the chairs in the succession of order be the chair of government operations, budget, capital, and personnel, public safety, and then health and human services.
Okay. So there was a second to that. Rich is not here anymore. Other comments? Is this what we would like to put forward for 2024 succession? And then we can talk further if we want about
policy update,
a policy or something. Okay, all in favor? That's unanimous. And
thank you.
Thank you, Katrina. And we'll see that at the next legislature, and you can all help me explain what the thinking was on this. Okay, and I'm also going to make a note that we talk a little bit about the policy for that in the future. Okay, we're looking good on time. I was just going to remind folks that several people went to NISAC, which is great. That is an authorized, pre-authorized conference that legislators can go to. If you want to go to a different conference, folks need to come to the GO committee and say, here's what I'm interested in, here's the dates, here's how much it costs. Please do that, and then this committee is the group tasked with saying, yeah, that makes sense, you should go to that, or, well, you probably shouldn't be going to a poetry conference on, government money, although poetry is important. So just a reminder for you folks here, I will probably send out an email to the rest of the legislators, just so everyone remembers that's what you're supposed to do if you want to go to a different conference. And legislators have a little bit more money this year, right? $1,200?
I think it was a little bit higher than that, but I can double check. I almost think
15.
15?
14 or 15.
Okay. So NISAC is a little bit more expensive, so you may have used some of your funding for that, but yeah, and the clerks keep track of all of that for us, so thank you. Let's see, Chief Equity and Diversity Officer, I think Charlene is here on Zoom. Do you have any updates for us?
Hello. Good
Hi.
morning. Well, almost good afternoon. Yes, I have a few updates. Bridget, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It kind of gives the backbone of my update today, so you guys had a visual. Everyone should have gotten an invite to our summit that will be coming up on April 9th. It's called Leadership at Every Level, a DEI Journey. We've partnered with IC, and it will be held in the Emerson Suites. We are currently finalizing all of the logistics, and you will get an additional email about that. So we're very, very excited to continue in our efforts to build institutional capacity, meaning that people are equipped with the ways of the DEI landscape. So this is not foreign to our leaders. They understand the ways in which we would have to operationalize what DEI looks like, which through my assessment thus far, Tompkins County has done a lot of work in that area. And so it's not like we're reinventing the wheel or starting from scratch. It's really about enhancing those practices and making a robust space for our constituents to understand how we operate in that way. The next thing is my listening tour. is still ongoing. I am coming to the end of that. I've met with all of our departments, minus 2 or 3. So I'm very excited to be able to report what that high-level qualitative and quantitative data is in relation to that. So please keep a lookout in the upcoming weeks for that. And that'll be a part of that equity baseline assessment as well as we develop what our scorecard will be through our equity report moving forward for the rest of the year. Lastly, I just wanted to keep on your radar that we did share icebreaker prompts with our department heads to start having those equity and diversity and inclusion conversations at staff meetings. Very low-hanging fruit, just an opportunity for people to gather in formal and informal spaces around related topics. And that seems to be going well. I've been getting requests from department heads and their deputies on, different tools and tricks to introduce these conversations in a manner that causes the conversations to be fruitful within their departments. And then later on, perhaps they can move into a space to have tangible outcomes. So that is my update, and thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Can you say the date of the summit again?
Yes, April 9th from 12, it's a Tuesday from 12 to 5, and lunch will be provided. Everyone should have gotten an email with the following calendar invite. And if you'd like to register, you just simply say yes on the calendar invite, and I will record your registration.
Okay, great. Questions for Charlene? All right, well, thanks for being here and updating us.
Thank you.
County Attorney, Holly Mosher.
I don't really have much more to report since Tuesday night, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Questions? All right. Thank you. Director of Finance, Lori Scarrett.
Thank you. I do not have an update today.
Okay. Thanks for being here, though. Communications Director, Dominic Recchio.
Very briefly, you asked me to update about that event that's been planned by the Public Information Advisory Board. You have all elected officials, chief elected officials and legislators in the county have received an invitation to an event later in March. It'll be a networking event at the library between members of the local media and elected officials. There'll be a few very brief panels just talking about how to strengthen the relationship, about local issues that are important to be covered. It's not an event open to the public. I'm not giving all the details here for that reason in part. But the event reminder will be sent a couple of times before. We already have a couple dozen people signed up. And it's part of the effort from the Public Information Advisory Board to improve the flow of information to the public. So it's kind of born out of the newspaper of record conversations that we had last year and that have been going on. So I can answer any questions afterward about that. Just a very brief update. We've had some questions from a legislator about the cable broadcast system of the legislature meetings. A part within that system in an old computer recently broke, and Rob has repaired it with some support from ITS, and now we are back rerunning our meetings onto cable. For a brief period, we were unable to rebroadcast a meeting. So now the meetings of the full legislature will run at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Monday, Thursday, and Saturday on Channel 15. And there was also a request to play the Community Recovery Fund video on there. That plays every day at noon and 6 p.m. And then in the future, now that we have some updated technology, we will run all the videos that Rob has produced for different departments on the county on there in sort of a commercial style throughout the day, randomly, in addition to the static PowerPoint bulletin board. And there may be some other repairs to that system that are needed and can update in the future as those become clearer. And then the last thing I wanted to share was we're continuing to move forward with the planning for the Tompkins County website revamp. And right now we're getting into, we've just completed a round of surveys of the public and different county staff who use the website. So about 300 members of the public provided their insights, and then some staff members who manage the website or manage programs all provided insights. Those insights are all being used to decide what content to move over, improve, and how different functionality within the site should change. So we're going to have a really modern site that works for our employees and the public. We're headed there. Still hoping end of 2024 for the finalization of that and launch. And there will be several different updates each month that are coming. We're kind of in the work behind the scenes stage at this time.
Okay, great. Questions, comments? Greg?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to watch a couple other municipal meetings recently, and just huge shout out to Rob. Because what we're able to broadcast and how we're able to capture comments and the audio, the video, all of it seamlessly integrating. Super kudos to Rob, the one that nobody ever really sees behind the glass up there, Oz, giving us the 1 minute mark or the thumbs up. So I really appreciate that work, and we're incredibly fortunate to have the technology that we do have to support our meeting, because not every place has that, and by far, I think our broadcasts of our meetings are far superior to most out there, probably across the state.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah, I will just echo the appreciation of Rob. He's come on not only to learn a new system, but then change the whole system, relearn that, and then implement different facets of it. And it doesn't always work exactly how we want it to, but he does an amazing job of troubleshooting and broadcasting. So I agree.
Yeah,
thanks.
Definitely. Susan.
I also wanted to thank you for all the press releases, all the information that's sent out. When I first joined the legislature, I would try to summarize every legislative meeting to put on my neighborhood listservs. I have a very active constituency. They email me constantly. Your summaries are fabulous, and but all of the press releases and the information that you send us, I send on. There's a lot to share. They generate a lot of email from me. So I look at them sometimes and think, oh, do I want to send that? But I do, because it's good public information. So I just wanted to thank you, because it's a lot of work to get to condense all of the legislative meeting comments and discussion in a way that's comprehensible and gets to the point. So thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Glad to hear about the event with the media, I think, and the local officials. I think that's terrific. You said it would not be open to the public. Thinking about our retreats and things, don't we have to allow the public if someone wants to come?
Not an expert on each piece of that.
I check on that, because especially with the media there, we don't want to have someone say, I'd like to sit in on this, and we, especially if we have more than 8 or up to 8 legislators there, for example. I think probably you ought to check on that one.
Sure, maybe it could be rephrased as we're not actively inviting and announcing.
Well, that's all right.
To the wide public.
We'd say that's how we handle retreats. Very seldom do we have anybody asked to come to it from the public, but it doesn't mean we can exclude them.
Yeah, I think if folks show up, we wouldn't say you can't come in, but there's no public announcement going out, right?
Correct. Yeah, and some of these questions we'll bring back to the Public Information Advisory Board, planning it as well. There's a sort of subgroup of that group that's been assisting with the planning efforts.
Okay. Anything else? I don't see anything else. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any updates from committee members? Anything else before this committee today? We ran 2 minutes over. All right. Thank you all very much. We are adjourned.